to yet another welcome to yet another podcast recording of Agribusiness Matters. My name is Venki Ramachandran. Agribusiness Matters is an endeavor to discover system thinking in food and agriculture. Today we are going to talk about methane and animal nutrition. If you've been following the entire Agritech discourse and largely in today's climate change ecosystem, you would have noticed that today the discussions about methane have been getting a little more shriller by the day. A few weeks back, economists had an article that said that treating beef like coal would make a big dent in greenhouse gas emissions. When I look at the role of methane and animal nutrition, I'm discovering a certain kind of a system thinking principle that is, I think, perhaps worth examining. That is, what happens when you apply linear approaches to cyclical phenomena? To explore this subject of methane and animal nutrition, we have Saloni Godbole, who is the co-founder of Occamy Biosciences. Saloni is a microbiologist turned Agritech entrepreneur. So, Saloni, I wanted to start off with, you were a researcher in Tata Cancer Institute, and you had worked on tumor biology, hair follicle stem cells, and all of that. Tell me, how did that journey from that kind of a research domain to Agritech really start off with?
Yeah, hi Venki. This was a long pending thing we had to do. Yeah, so you're finally doing it. I'm really glad. And the first question itself takes me back to my journey where it all started. So I was a typical microbiology student, finished my master's, and then wanted to take up a PhD somewhere abroad, because that's how scientists in India go ahead about it. And before that, I realized that I lack experience to, actually go to US and get a PhD done. So let me get on to some research institute, understand how it works in depth, and then do it. So that's how I joined Tata Cancer Research as a junior researcher, a trainee, and sort of the basics that you begin with. And then so there are different labs, and the different labs work on different subjects. So one of the the lab that I joined specifically worked on skin, hair follicular stem cells, skin cancer, and all these areas of specifics of cancer. And it had the largest animal house setup. So we used to study on mice, we used to study on other rodents and things like that. So that was the exposure that I was looking at. And while we were completely surrounded with cancer, why it happens, the different dimensions of it, there was a lot of talk at that moment of time that happened, which said that, there is nutrition plays an important role. And because of nutrition, now we see, because of the adulterated nutrition that we are consuming, we see a lot of rise in cancers, even with people who are not consuming any cancer causing agents, they may not be smoking, they may not be having tobacco or anything of that sort, but yet there is a rise in cancer. And what could that reason be? Because we do have the genes within us, they just need to be switched on. So what are the trigger factors in those genes? So after I was doing that sort of a research there, my mind had already started thinking of, what is something that the nutrition is doing? And are we taking it pretty casually? Then it should be, So these were the things that were happening around in my mind. And meanwhile, I was applying for my PhD. And some things happened in the research center where I realized that there's a lot of grant coming in to do research and publish papers. Mm-hmm. And based upon the research that happens at Tata Research or any other institute in India, there are Koreans, there are Chinese, and there are Americans who are developing technologies and then selling it to us. So the research funding that we are getting only gets into writing theses or papers. And that is where I realized that this is really not something that I would like to do. I would first like to get applied research on plate. It could be a very small product, but I have to use my knowledge and get it for the use of people here. I would rather use the funding to develop or research in a manner that a product is created out of it and people benefit out of it. So with that, I realized that PhD is not something I would go ahead about at this moment of time, because that is all about working, finding out, figuring out, and things like that. And while I was writing my SOPs for the admissions and PhD processes, I realized that my entire interest lie in becoming more of an entrepreneur rather than a researcher. So that absolutely clicked. And then I realized that, okay, let's do something of our own with whatever knowledge that I have. Let's get into something. And the first goal was to get into having cheaper cancer diagnostics being made and got into the market, manufacture something. There's so much of research already done. Why don't we just buy it from the scientist and then manufacturing it? So then we really wasted 1 year to figure out what could be the possible options that we could explore. But we realized that there are a lot of big fishes in the market who would just want to buy these economic technologies, and they would not let them come into the market, because then their expensive technologies will not be sold out in the market. So then this made us realize that we need funds, and we need to have our own funds to buy our technologies, and no investor, no bank is going to give us to buy someone else's product and then make it our own. So then I was also parallelly looking for a co-founder. So I fortunately found a senior scientist who had an industry experience of 16, 17 years in a pharma company. And I thought maybe he could be the right person, because I am very naive when it comes to whether it is entrepreneurship or research. So let me have someone at the backing who is very rock solid in that. And then I found my co-founder in the same journey, and he suggested, hey, why don't we explore the animal husbandry domain? So I really had no clue about it. Neither did I like animals or anything of that sort. But we really did some research and realized that there was a dearth of scientific inputs in the animal husbandry domain. That was the one reason it really got excited us, because we wanted to have a scientific approach to everything that we are doing. And with science, I mean backed by research, backed by possibilities and experimental approach with regards to the Indian scenario, because there are always international papers that scientists refer to and arrive at their own conclusions. We don't have a data for our own sake. And so we wanted to have something of that sort, and we explored animal nutrition because that was the root cause of everything that is happening. We also came across areas where there were talks regarding adulterated milk causing a lot of cancers. So it triggered to the old story and the new story, where I really got interested in identifying what happens in the milk industry. What is the root cause of all of this? And that's where animal nutrition came into picture, where we realized that this is where things are being ruined. If this gets sorted, then everything else, so rather than focusing on having cheaper cancer diagnostics, let's work on not having cancer due to milk or adulterated nutrition or anything of that sort. So we completely went in that direction, explored that market. To begin with, this is how we started. And in that journey itself, we pivoted 2-3 times to actually realize what the community really wants. And today we are here trying to do something innovative and something that would be one of the solutions to most of the problems of the dairy industry.
No, so because you're a meditation teacher also, so I want to maybe delve into this a little bit more deeper, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
See, typically, today, when I look at, let's say, somebody who has been studying cancer, probably when he wants to maybe sort of entrepreneurship there, maybe, think about exploring options of, like, today there's a lot of talk about T cells to, which sort of, which self-heal cancer and those kind of scientific domains are there. To kind of make a 180-degree switch, because let's from there to animal husbandry, like, let's be fair, right? Today, animal husbandry is not a subject that is considered sexy, right? There is a whole lot of baggage that comes in that domain, right? So I'm in kind of trying to understand your, what was it like in your mental landscape when you thought that, okay, I'm going to not look at cancer and those things that typically get a lot of attention. Rather, I'm going to look at the gut of a cow and examine, study them deeper. How did that inner transition happen for you?
Right. So a very important question indeed, because I myself was of that opinion that, let's do something into stem cells, let's do into, something exotic that would fetch a lot of money and all those sort of things, But the more we started reading about animal nutrition, the situation in India, the sort of scenario that we are into, and also the fact that it is 90% microbiology. So I always had to, being a microbiologist and the love of microbes that I have, I always want to do something innovative in terms of microbiology, or have a microbiology approach to everything, because for that matter, I feel and I believe that microbes do have the power to offer solutions to everything. So I really wanted to have products made based out of microbiology, and this particular domain gave me that leeway to apply microbiology into things that have not been done before. So that is something that kept me interested in knowing more, because there was no one else in the market. It was all open land where I have to study on my own. I need to find out my own issues, then work on products which would suit our needs. So that was one thing which kept me interested. There were a lot of times where I doubted myself that, is it really the industry I would want to get into, because it's all a mess, and why am I getting into this?
Unorganized mess.
Completely unorganized mess. But the more I realized that this is organized, and if everyone starts working on to cancer and stem cells, then who will get on to the core rural problems? Because I am a consumer of milk, I like dairy products, and I am affected because of the adulteration in them. So if I'm not able to solve an everyday problem, what is the point in solving problems that might occur to someone at some point in their lives? And secondly, if I work on cancer technology, stem cells, it could hardly benefit a smaller, like, we would always want it to be used by very small people. We don't want people to get diseased and use stem cell technologies and things like that. So my approach was more towards prevention rather than treatment, and that's why I realized and that this is something one needs to do. And I have the time because I started early in life. So when I started around 22, 25, when I was 22 or 23, I think that's where I realized I somehow knew that I have the time to start it now, so that in 5 years, 6 years down the line, I am somewhere where I'm creating a bigger impact than what it is at this moment of time. And more so, if you think, one common problem which I thought was, see, there are many other trigger factors for cancer, right? But if you need to work on something that is a part of everyone's life, is difficult, because some people smoke, some people don't, some people take a particular sort of lifestyle, others don't. But milk was a common factor. Rich, poor, a bus conductor to a rickshawala to a tycoon is consuming milk. So if you see the spectrum of consumption of milk and milk products, it is more. So if I'm able to work on milk in a manner that it is of a high quality, it is of a certain standard like that of European countries, then I am solving most of the problems that the society is facing, as well as the dairy value chain is facing. So rather than cancer, I thought this is of a bigger problem which I need to solve to cut it short. And that's where I wanted to attack a bigger problem.
No, it's actually, thank you for making me feel older. When you said that, you said you started at 22.
Yeah.
It's striking me that, perhaps is that why you named the company from a Harry Potter's mythological animal there?
Yeah, so there was a lot of discussion when it came to naming the company, and I really was clueless about what to name it, because I'm really bad at such things. But it was my co-founder who in spite of being a senior person, was a Harry Potter fan, and he just said, hey, I have come across this character from Fantastic Beasts, which is a Harry Potter
they originate from India.
Yeah, so all the description that the animal had, it's not a snake, but it's a snake which has birds, and it's a very you could say a very interesting character, and it's the values that the character has which we resonated with. So one of the things is it originated in India. Whatever it makes, the eggs that it produces are very precious. Then third, the best and the third value that it perceives is that it could fit into any space, any size, depending upon the situation. So if you want us to be small, we'll be small. If you want us to be really aggressive, we are ready to be that. And these are the values that really resonated with us, because we wanted to create scientific products. So we wanted to be made in India. We wanted to be something that suits everyone's needs as future. We began with the animal husbandry industry, but we are really looking forward to doing a lot of research to create microbe-based products for everyone in the society. So this journey has just begun, and resonating with the bird like snake helps us to crawl as well as fly if required.
No, it's a nice spirit animal approach, where you say that this is my spirit animal. And I really like what you said in terms of, we can grow a house as much as we want in small, and grow small also if need be, right? I really like this aspect, what you said, that it's 90% about microbiology. I want to unpack that a little bit more deeper, right? Because today, maybe perhaps not many might know that it's actually the microbes that makes cows digest the grass that they eat.
Yes.
Right? So I don't think not many people appreciate the depth in which this kind of this seems like a very simple thing. Yeah, of course, cows eat grass, and that's what we see there. But what goes into to make cows digest grass, I think is something. Help me unpack the mysterious world. Why do you think that we have to bring so much attention to microbes in this domain?
Right, perfect. So to make it simpler for a larger, wider audience, which may not be aware of how it goes, let's even consider humans, first, to take an example. We eat something, and let's say we are eating fish, but what gets to our body is proteins, right? Now, fish is made up of many things. So when we eat them, they are churned, they are into pieces, then there are the digestive juices that come into play in our stomach. And ultimately, it is again the microbes in our stomach who are converting the complex meat into simpler proteins. Now, these simpler proteins then are taken up by our bodily systems, right? So the metabolism happens and is one of the major features of what microbes do. So even if we ourselves call it, let's say, if you have eaten something heavy, in India specifically, let's say if there is meat or if there is festival food, you always tend to have buttermilk with it. Now, buttermilk is a rich source of probiotic, a natural source of probiotic. And why you have it is because of this, that you have had something heavy. Now you really need some external probiotics to really support you. So when it comes to animals also, everything that is coming from outside and then being utilized in the body is by the means of microbes, completely by microbes. So these are micro factories who will take all your heavy things, convert it into smaller things with their abilities, with their enzymes, with all that they do. And then those smaller things are absorbed by our cells. So now in case of cows, what happens is, unlike us, the cows have 4 stomachs. And it's a process that first it gets into the first stomach, then they keep it there for a while. You'll see them ruminating, like they can take it from the first stomach and then eat it back. So first stomach is about the storage. The second stomach is about sending all the partially digested material after the storage. So while they're storing the feed, it is also mixing with saliva and sort of being partially digested, just like it happens in our mouth. So then it passes on to the second stomach, where it is partially digested, partially undigested. Again, a lot of secretion happens. There are a different set of microbes there who are doing their activity. Then it is passed on to the third stomach, where again, it is more digested than it was before, solidified, mushy, and the last gut, where there can be bacteria or it cannot be. It depends upon the sort of animal that it is. And what happens is that here, even if there are bacteria, they are of a different sort. So whatever is being digested and converted from a grass or a oil seed, you'll get small molecules at the last stomach. So now these molecules from the last stomach will be then taken up by the intestine. So the entire process of what is happening when the nutrition is fed is done by microbes. There is no other way this could be done. Now, the microbes in our stomach and in cow's stomach are way different. Some of the species would be similar, but since they eat different things, they have different set of bacteria to process it. And all the animal nutrition, so to optimize the animal nutrition in the gut, the microbes have to be optimized. If you are aware of visiting farms, if you are aware of meeting farmers and dairy farmers, you will see that sometimes just by looking at the cow dung, you'll be able to find out if the gut is okay or no, just like us.
Right.
And now this thing here of giving the importance to the microbes is not understood by us. Our ancestors, the old age farming practices did consider that, but recently with the partial knowledge of commercialization, we have missed out on really thinking and giving an importance to these microbes who are actually doing everything.
No, you're giving me a very interesting aspect here, which is to compare human process with animals here. So I'm also going to play along in that line, okay, if you don't mind. For humans, typically, what I have read, and again, I get to put a disclaimer, I'm not a scientist. I'm largely somebody who interprets and makes sense of things. And so if there is something that is what I'm saying is not scientifically valid, feel free to correct me. I'm a student of science, so I kind of try and keep up with whatever is happening there. So one of the interesting things I had read many years back was that for humans, the enzyme, right, which allows us to digest milk, right, that comes down in I think sometime about 7 or 12, I think. I think it's 7. I remember 7 or probably 12. I don't remember exactly. And this enzyme varies across different continents. Like for somebody who's grown up in Europe, this enzyme is much more active when compared to somebody who's grown up in India. So the reason why I'm bringing all of this example in a quasi-scientific way is to bring a point that for each of our bodies, the place also determines the kind of microbes and microbes that are going into our stomach, right? So help us understand that this aspect there, right? In this, they say, I'm assuming the same would hold true for cows also, in terms of the different, microbes would, the composition of the microbes in the gut would also vary significantly based on the location.
Absolutely, it does differ because, like I said, see, microbes are everywhere. Even when we say that there's life on Mars, it's nothing but microbes that people have found out, right? So given a situation, whatever comes their way, there would be a selective number of microbes that would be growing in that particular area and doing their job. They can be good microbes and bad microbes both, right? So now, depending upon the different geographies, let's say, even if we consider India, now there are, when it comes to animal nutrition, what is fed in the southern countries is not fed in the northern countries, because animal husbandry is largely dependent on agricultural wastes, and it's an allied job. So whatever is being sown into their fields is naturally fed to the animals. So as the crops are different, the nutrition becomes different. Now, if the nutrition is different, they would require different microbes to process it. Now, there are certain set of microbes that are really common and their job is the same wherever they go. So there are some same organisms which are required, like few strains which are anyway required, whether you are in South India or in North India. But then after that, there are certain specific microbes which are required as per that geographical region, because the water in that region is different, the climate there is different, and the health of microbes and the survival of microbes is also dependent on all these weather conditions. So while we were talking of methane again, so even let's say it's the gut again, which is important here when we talk of methane emissions from the animal, because there are bacteria in the stomach who are utilizing the ammonia and the methane and then releasing it in that form, whether it is the cow dung or while they are ruminating. So if the gut again is stronger enough to utilize all that is coming in, naturally the methane release is going to be lesser.
Yeah, and I think which is where we think the point that I think in our earlier conversations we talked about, right? That there is a direct correlation between reducing methane and improving the productivity.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So although I like we discussed, I have some kind of an anti-productivity bias, which we will delve into at some point. But I think it's essential to put the ground rules for that point in terms of discussing what is the link between reducing methane and increasing the productivity.
Right. See, so like I said, it's a natural process, because for example, if you are eating something, naturally, whatever is not being utilized by the body is going to be excreted out. Right. So if it is cow urine or cow dung, okay. So whatever is metabolized by the microbes and then used up by the body and have not been used by the body is sent out naturally in the form of cow dung. Now, if you see, it is very interesting to note here that there is methane emitted in the form of cow dung. Now, this cow dung is used for vermicomposting, or even creating a slurry and then being used by biogas, or it is also used as manure. So there are a lot of things that this particular cow dung is doing, which is having a certain amount of methane into it. Now, if the digestion of the cow is improved, it will ensure that the excreta is not having the methane, because methane in the stomach. There's methane in the stomach. The microbes present there are utilizing it to convert into other products, because we don't have methane consuming bacteria, but bacteria or the microbes present in the cow's gut do have the ability to take up all the methane. Now, because we don't have these right set of bacteria present there, the right set of environment for the bacteria to do their job into the gut, what is happening is they're only doing the job that much they could do it. So if they're working in an efficiency of, let's say, 50%, then all that efficiency gets converted into milk. The rest of the methane that has not been taken up by the bacteria is then excreted, because it's no more useful for the body. But again, if you see in our Indian culture, this is important to note that because we know that this methane is coming out, we are then making use of it into 10 different things. And now people are talking of organic farming, people are talking of agriculture and all those things to reduce the methane emissions. But the agriculture is not possible unless you use the cow dung.
Yeah, and I think that's where today there's also the climate discourse has made it like in straight terms, right? Like we don't first of all, we don't distinguish between a biogenic methane and methane that comes from other fossil fuels.
Right.
Secondly, we don't take into fact that after 9 years it goes back to the soil back as carbon, and then plant takes it as something, the process gets continued cyclically. So that is also another reason there. But I'm interested to delve into this aspect which you talked about right now, right? That right now there is the efficiency in which that we are looking at how much the cows are doing. So can you delve into a little bit more, right? Because maybe in this, that efficiency translates in terms of how much does it directly correlate with the amount of methane that gets released, or how and what ways are you defining its efficiency?
Right. So see, efficiency means naturally, because everything has become commercial now, efficiency means the per animal productivity, right? So it varies breed to breed, right? But if we simply consider, US has an average per day per animal capacity of 40 liters, optimized after years and years of dairy practice. Whereas in India, we only have it 5 liters per day. Because that's an average, because there are a lot of indigenous varieties that we are talking of. Now, this potency or this capability of an animal comes from its genetic make, right? And US has also gone to an extent that they have really altered the genetic makeups to actually make milking animals, sort of, as they say, that they would only be procuring milk, and they have commercialized every aspect of it. Now, that's because they consider dairy as a means of economics only. But when we come to India, dairy has been a part of the culture, religion, as well as an everyday practice. And now there has to be an incorporation of economics and a commercial angle to be added to it. So considering the breed, considering the genetic makeup, in India, we need to realize what is the optimum capacity that a certain breed can go to. And then can we ensure that with time, if we have, let's say, if there is a Gir cow, let's say, which has a certain potential to make around 10 liters a day. So if we start feeding it right, if everything around it is optimized, the breed that it would create in the next generation is naturally going to be a higher producer than the mother. Then again, you have to be higher. It's just like humans. So if you take care of your family, your genes, your health, and you give right food, right education, then naturally the children in your family are going to be way superior than we were. Right? Then the next generation will naturally be like that. So it takes years and years for the for us to match the genetic evolution to reach to a stage where we are naturally procuring high yielding animals. But it should first begin with having an optimized approach to nutrition, to health, to all the practices that go around dairy. Even procurement has to be of an optimum quality. So in India, because we have different species, there have to be different parameters set for efficiency. For example, buffaloes versus cows. Now, buffaloes are naturally a little higher milk producers, but buffaloes are known for the high fat content and high SNF content in milk. Right, so they're more important when your concern is to make butters and ice creams and things like that. Whereas if you see cows, the efficiency is more about the liters of milk that it produces rather than the fat content in it, because the fat content there is naturally lesser. So when I mean efficiency, we need to look at all detailed aspects of different breeds in different areas, ensure that the optimum practices are carried out in the first generation, and then naturally shift it to become better and better producers, because then people would say that if it was not natural to for a certain breed to make a certain liter of milk, then why are we going against nature? We'll have to go against nature. I mean, this is not going against nature rather, but evolving with the requirements, and therefore we are giving the time to actually evolve breed wise or generation wise, rather than just genetically altering it right away and creating a breed that would naturally be created after 10 years, but we are creating it just right away. So that is going against nature. But if we start now and start efficiently working on all aspects, from precisely with nutrition, because 70% of the costs of a farmer are nutrition. So if nutrition is taken care of really well, all other factors will be taken care of. The animal efficiency naturally improves in terms of milk it produces, quality of milk it produces, the number of pregnancies that it gives. Because if you see, 10 years down the line, my grandmother also reared buffaloes. So she used to tell me that our buffaloes then used to have 6-7 pregnancies till the time they died. And now that number has gone down to only 2 to 3 pregnancies.
Yeah, which is exactly the point I want to bring in here, right? See, there is in genetics also, we talk about the genetic potential and yield potential, right? Where we say, the yield potential has to come at least closer enough to the genetic potential.
Right.
Now,
right.
I'm trying to understand the generalizing aspect of nutrition here, right? Because today, we have an Ongol breed or a Gir or a Kankaraj, and there's so many varieties here. And like we've discussed before, each of these varieties have evolved based on the particular geographic conditions and the ecological niches that they were in.
Right.
So are you suggesting that a standardized nutrition approach would, irrespective of where they are and which kind of genetic pool they are in, would improve their potential in that genetic niche? Is that the approach that you're alluding to here?
Yes. To begin with, that is one of the approaches. Because see, considering the geographical differences and the understanding of dairy farmers, we cannot directly jump on to being the best in the industry. Correct. Right, so it should somewhere start slow, and the first thing that we need to do is to create an awareness in farmers that nutrition is an important aspect, and that it should be done in a scientific manner, not just for having the best out of the commercial inputs that you're putting in, but also for a sustainable venture. That is A. So like you rightly said, if we have a certain approach and if we realize that what all does a animal really require, so it is basic nutrition, it is energy, fat, protein, water, it is microbes, precisely, it is mineral mixtures, it is protein, so when we talk to farmers always say that, who are you to come and tell us? We have been doing this, our forefathers have been doing this for years and years. So this is the material available and we feed it. We don't need to do anything extra. But they're not realizing the fact that with changing times, the agricultural produce that is coming has also been diluted. And it is not providing the natural resources that it used to 10 years ago. So therefore, an input of supplements, an input of protein nutrition, enzymes, or all these things are important if you would want to do that. Now, how much of an enzyme, how much of a protein, this all depends and may vary case to case, region to region, depending upon what is substituted with it. But on an extent, 80% the formula should be same. And this is also one of the reasons why we are not able to really arrive at a carbon credit charts with regards to animal husbandry, because everywhere everyone is feeding something else. So whatever is coming out of the animal is never been measured. It's such a sad state that in India we don't even have, I mean, there are hardly 1 or 2 facilities where we are even able to measure the methane release. Otherwise, none of the veterinary colleges or research institutes even have that capacity to even test what has been released. Only then we can realize whether it is more, whether someone is reducing it or things like that. So it has to begin somewhere. And only after that we can arrive at certain set standards that, okay, when you feed 80% of this feed or this as a feeding pattern, then this is what the animal is doing. And NDDB or, other dairy inputs of the government have been trying to do that. But how much of it actually translates at the rural level?
No, see, this is where I want to push back a little bit more on this, right? Like, because typically what happens is when you are, like, you take India's history with white revolution,
yes,
right? We had a lot of indigenous varieties and we started mixing, we sort of inseminating them with other varieties there, which could increase the productivity. Eventually, what happened is that over time, I might be lynched for saying this because considering how much of reverence we have for white revolution, but I'll still go ahead and say, but eventually we did lose certain indigenous varieties because of this long-term effect of just focusing on particular variables, right? In terms of improving yield and the growth there. So, and now it seems like we are taking this dimension to the next level, second next level, right? Because today, we are saying that, even irrespective of the different genetic makeup, we are trying to improve the productivity. So help me understand this trade-off between maintaining the diversity of our different varieties so that we have a rich genetic pool vis-a-vis improving the productivity. To me, they seem like they are in some kind of a locked in a zero-sum game, where because we want to increase the productivity, at some stage you will lose out the different varieties. Is my assumption right, or what is how do you unpack this?
See, there are 2 factors when we talk of this, and the balance could only be when we are trying to keep them separate. A is research in terms of improving the productivity, working with breeds, maintaining the breeds, or nowadays, as you know, it's all artificial insemination. So even if we don't have the animal, but the semens could be preserved for whatever reasons for years to come. But then there has to be one research domain which is particularly focusing on getting the right breeds, like the government has been trying to do, create high yielding calves. So there can be breeding between the 2 high producing animals so that a higher breed is been made. For example, this is what Brazil has done. So they have a Gir variety which gives around 18 to 20 liters of milk. But it's the same Gir that we have in Gir Gujarat. But they have been optimized it in years and they have worked on it specifically. And it took them 10, 15 years also. So it's not a quick story. But then there's one wing which is focusing on research and looking into these aspects of preserving, doing things, maintaining the breeds and ensuring that higher breeds are made and all of that. And the other wing is about the commercialization and dairy as a venture, because what happens is, as any other country, now if you see Europe, New Zealand, or US for that matter, their dairy culture started years ago. The commercialization started years ago. And just like any other phase, there's a log phase and there's an exponential phase. And now they're at a scale where everything is stagnant. They've reached their optimum potentials. So now they're figuring out ways of, optimizing it more by what we talk of methane blockers and things like that, because there's nothing else that they can do further, so they're diverging into aspects which may be anti-natural eventually, or which are which can create a spark. You never know, because their optimum potential has been arrived. They're there already. But when it comes to China, when it comes to Asia, countries like us, where the population is rising and we are in a dire need of even meeting our nutrition needs, and milk as a major source, it is important that somewhere we continue our economical and commercial approach with the high yielding breeds that we have, whether it is cows or buffaloes. And with that regard, optimize everything to ensure the commercialization is proper. Now, that does not mean, again, that has created a lot of questions saying that animals are becoming milking machines and, things like that. But I would really suggest to have a conscious approach in terms of optimizing the animal ability at least. I'm not saying let's change the breed or let's start milking the A1 animals, so to say, as they say, the foreign breeds. So it is not that for the sake of commercializing, you compromise on quality. But where there is a commercial approach, everything has to be jotted down with regards to economics of nutrition, economics of health, economics of what is the input versus the output, all of that, and also consideration to the ethics and morality there.
Yeah. No, I totally get your point, right? I mean, I've studied in the past in agribusiness matters, I've studied the Australia's model. And I've written about it, right? In terms of in 80s, we saw a similar situation. What now we are seeing in 2023.
Right.
In 80s, there was this moment when production was declining. There was a decreasing number of animal number dividend. And then they started working on improving the productivity.
Right.
And it almost seems like at this point, what we are in India, where there is a declining animal number dividend. We are seeing that the numbers are declining. So, and then we are now trying to at this point, we are now trying to improve the productivity in that sense.
Right. And there's not only animal reduction in the animal numbers, but somewhere it is also become difficult to have a dairy venture. The youth today do not want to keep doing what their forefathers did, because when you have a dairy farm, you cannot take a day off. You cannot travel because every day you have to milk the animal. And the animal will only be milked with certain hands because it gets used to those persons who are doing it. So because it is very laborious, it binds you. The youth today are not interested to do that. So slowly the culture is shifting to bigger farms rather than marginal farmers with 1 or 2 animals at the grassroots level. We would soon be going to that era, just like US or European countries, where there would be grasslands. There would be thousands and thousands of animals, milk procured from at least in the cities. That is how it is going to be. Rather, the winds seem to be in that direction. But looking at the rural population and the rural distribution that we have, even the marginal farmers are going to stay. So it all depends upon economics and all that we know. The milk price increasing, there's inflation, there's a lot of factors affecting dairy, because if the nutrition is becoming expensive, then the dairy becomes expensive. So if the farmers don't find it viable, soon the marginal farmers are going to shift from just milking, like having milking animals, or the option then lies with them is to convert it into products which fetch a higher price. And interestingly, there's a lot of talk when it comes to intolerance to milk and people shifting from milk to vegan options, or things like that. So to give you some numbers, 66% of population in India is intolerant to milk. It is intolerant to milk because, like you said, the enzymes may not be present or things like that. But still, as I think till 18, we have always been drinking milk. Whether it is
I think much older than what is necessarily agreed upon. Right.
So now what happens is, and if you correlate with the scriptures in India, the milk consumption is always lower. It was the consumption of products more than the milk consumption directly. And this is where now we need to go to. So if you see, there can be intolerance to milk, but there is no intolerance to ice cream, cheese, butter, or buttermilk, or dahi for that matter. So now what has happened is that, and even if now when you heard a lot of noise around India importing milk and milk products because of the summers, there was this lot of discussion that we need milk and there's shortage of butter today in the country, and that's why we need to import milk.
And that's also because we did export a lot more than
right. So the thing is that people have now shifted to the milk products from consuming milk per se. So even at the farmer level, it is procuring high quality milk so that a high quality product can be made. And then that fetches more money to make the business more viable.
No, but tell me one thing. Today, when you're looking at this point, I was also thinking about it when you brought this up, right? In terms of, there's like you said, right? The 63% of people who are becoming milk intolerant.
Yes.
It almost seems very interesting at this stage where, because at a certain level where we are also, people today you go to restaurants, you'll see there are lactose intolerant options are much more visible and prominent.
Right.
So I'm curious, why do you think that kind of trend is happening, especially at a time now when we are trying to improve the productivity of animals there?
That trend is real because I myself am affected with that, and I cannot consume paneer to that extent or milk to that extent that I used to even 2 years ago. And that's where I realized that I really need to do some research about this. So there could be some real people who are really having genuine issues with regards to digesting milk or milk products or casein or lactose, depending upon their genetic makeup. But largely, what has happened is that because of the commercialization, the inbreeding, the mixed breeding, and those sort of things, the quality of milk is not what it was years ago.
Yeah, so there could be a correlation between these two.
Right. So, and there's a lot of adulteration at the grassroots level, because of which hormonal injections, urea-like substances, all these added to milk. And why a farmer does that is because doing it the ethical way, he's not fetching enough money. The business is not viable when he tries to do it ethically, right? So therefore, these practices happen. Now, when these practices happen, the milk that we procure has also got compounds which our body was never used to. And therefore, we find it that we are intolerant. So the root cause again here lies in nutrition. Because nutrition has become expensive, the farmers had to adopt to adulterative means.
Yeah, I mean, I remember this conversation we had earlier, right? But you were talking about that cows also have a lot of digestion issues, yes. And because they're not able to absorb concentrated protein, right? So I mean, it's a very for an outside observer, it looks very intriguing, right? That do I have to work on the human microbiome, or do I have to work on the cow's microbiome?
Both. Because it all interlinked. We are the ones to consume milk as well. So that is where it all boils down to. And precisely, it is all tapping the root cause, And if you said that one thing right, whether it is commercialization or whether it is research or working with the indigenous breed, it all sets right if the nutrition is right. And with nutrition, people forget that water is also nutrition. Microbes are also nutrition. It's not just protein, fat, fiber. It is energy is also nutrition. And these components are not considered.
Why can you expand when you say energy is also nutrition and water is not nutrition?
Yes, water is also nutrition. So when I said that, what I meant is, see, I could be giving exotic cattle feeds. I could be giving really high good stuff to the animal. Okay. But if I'm not giving the right amount of milk, right amount of water to it, right amount of clean water to it, then the digestion is impacted. Because at the grassroots, at the stomach level, microbes only need water and the complex substances to get the job done. Right? And in most of the rural places in India, water is a problem. So even if the feed is of a certain quality, the water is not, creating a lot of gastro issues in animals. That is A.
There's a lot of metallic content also in the water.
Yeah, metallic content. But there's a funny story now, because not all metals are harmful for the body. You are giving commercial mineral mixtures to the animals. And then, there was one farm that I visited too. And we were talking about our products, and we were pitching them our products basically to tell them that we have all mineral mixtures and all that, and protein, and this is what you need. So that particular guy told me, there was one company who came to us before. It was a giant, and they said that they are not selling any other mineral, because that the animal receives from other feedstuffs. They're particularly having chromium and iron filings and chromium as source of nutrition, and that should be given, and it is an expensive product. So we are just giving that to our animals, and you suggest us what is right. So we already have this as a product versus you are here telling us about your story. So you tell us what is right. The simple thing that we did was we just tested the water. The water was already high in chromium and iron. So animal was already getting it. Right. And plus this company has now pitched that, oh, why don't you give chromium? And why are you not giving this? So the salesperson has done the job very well. But at the farm level, the animal is either going to get it extra and the farmer is paying extra for no reason. So now these things are not considered. You're not testing the water that is going to the animal. The water already has a lot of nutrition. It's minerals, elements, also bacteria. So that correlation is not happening. Secondly, since the cows, animals sit, stand, move around, there are a lot of things that they're doing. There are pests on them, there are flies on them. All this takes away a lot of energy.
Yeah, which is exactly what I wanted to bring to the next point, right? Today, when I looked at the data of the amount of grazing lands we've had over years, the grazing lands have come down, right? Today now, in states like Rajasthan, we see efforts to bring back common grazing lands. Villagers, out of desperation, are now trying to bring back grazing lands, and they're seeing some results there, right? And I was a bit of a ghee nerd for a while. And this friend was, this friend is is also an equally a ghee nerd, and he was telling me of the different ways in our culture, we have in India about the process we make ghee. And he told me this very interesting point. He said that a ghee that is made from a cow that doesn't graze vis-a-vis a ghee from a cow that grazes is very different. And so this guy was taking this effort to procure from a farmer in Gujarat who has an access to the neighboring graze land, and then he does all these kind of weird things to get this ghee. So I was very intrigued by when I was discussing this with it there, right? Because today, if you go back to the whole aspect of nutrition, it's obvious that the cows are meant for a certain kind of purposes activity, right? Today, it's almost like a philosophical question. Right? Today, where do cows are really needed for agriculture or not? Because earlier was, and if you go back to the times, we were using cows as draught animals. Yes. But today, any farmer who uses draught animals it's funnily enough is considered as backward and not using the latest technologies of machine. So most of the farmers, they also want to keep up with time, so they end up just having the cows being idle and not letting them graze enough also. So the reason I'm going to all of this rant is to explore what is the impact of grazing on nutrition, and do you see that also as a factor when you are looking at solutions that sort of change the nutrition?
Right. See, again, for commercialization, having grass pastures is going to be difficult in India, certainly. But there's always a certain set of businesses, if they could afford, who can pitch on to, like, let's say if it's a large farm, anyone who can afford acres and acres of land, they should be doing this, because scientifically grazing is really important. Why I tell you is for simple things, that if there's a child, again relating it to the human psychology, because we understand that better. So if there's a child, and if he or she is hungry, the mother wants to feed him something the mother wants, okay, beta, eat protein, eat this or eat that, eat dal chawal or things like that. And the people and the children are always fussy about it. Whereas if you tell them that, okay, things are made, and whenever you're hungry, just go eat it. So they'll only choose things what their body at that time wants, because our bodies have sensors enough to tell us what we need. So particularly at a growing age, children will always tend to have a lot of protein. They're very craving for protein, specifically in the teenage years, 8-9 years, or 10-12 years. They are craving for protein, craving for sweets, because they need that energy that comes from sugars. So this is the natural case.
My son is going to be very happy hearing this.
Right. So, so that's so if you see, the cravings are because it's not sugar that they're liking it, but the impact of sugar that their body needs, the energy that it provides. That's why they're craving these things, right? So when you let the cow loose on a grassland, it is going to eat enough as much as it requires. It will choose the right grass to eat. It can smell and sense that, okay, this grass is going to give me 17% protein. Let me eat that first. So that is the science that goes in eating. And when the nutrition gets proper, your product is proper. Plus the cow is moving around, the digestion is better, the utilization of energy is better. So it's like a complete cycle. But looking at commercialization, lack of space constraints, then you need to ensure that the nutrition is so crisp that it gives you results just like the dairy farm. And you also ensure that the animal is exercising enough. So if you see buffalo farms, specifically in areas like Ari Colony or Mumbai, the buffaloes are always standing most of the times. That is their exercise. Or the watersheds are always far off. So they need to walk that distance 2-3 times to have that water and then come back to their areas. And the nutrition is curated. So you ensure the similar result. But if you see, natural tendency is to graze around. Just like in poultry, people are thinking of grass fed and, let loose poultry culture and all of that free is coming back. Free range and all that is coming back again, because the animal will only eat what the body requires. It's like a natural app that tells you, okay, this is what I eat. In one of the farms that we've been to, there were calves, okay, and we have a specific product for calves as well. So there were calves, and before we give that product to the animal, we saw that the calves are licking a lot of red soil. Certainly indicated a lot of deficiencies that had. We started on to our protein and mineral mixture product to them. And after 2 weeks, we just went there to see what is the concern now. They had completely stopped eating that soil, which indicated that their deficiencies are fulfilled. They are getting it directly from the feed. Therefore, they're not just going here and there licking anything that they want. Because soil also has nutrition, but with soil, there could be bad microbes going in. There could be a lot of other things going in, So it's all about that. How well do you understand the animal and its requirements?
Yeah, no, which is where I want to delve a little bit more deeper also into the biological characteristics part, right? Like, when do you start, until when you start to, you treat cow as a cow, with its own consciousness vis-a-vis as a milking machine, right? I mean, the reason I'm also bringing this up is also is very intrigued by the trials paper that you shared with me, right? Where you had mentioned that there is natural decrease in milk volume every 12-15 days, which is the standard practice in lactation. And after your products, you notice that there is a decrease has been delayed.
Yes.
Right? So maybe you'd like to unpack that and also look at this aspect of till what extent are we going to let cow be cow?
Right. Certainly. A very, very valid question in terms of ethics that come into picture, the morality that goes in this industry. So I'll tell you what my understanding is and how I think about it. So what happens is, because we have a different breeds, I'll be taking from a brief angle where, let's say if there's Gir cow or Murrah buffalo, right? Naturally, as a breed, they have a certain capacity to milk, which has been known for generations. For example, a Gir would give you genetic potential that we have known as of whatever research papers we have, whatever data we have, known for years and years. For example, Murrah buffalo is the highest milk producer in terms of buffaloes and would give you around 16 to 20 liters of milk in the highest phase of milking. Okay, so because the generations before were giving that much of a milk, the generation now are also giving that much of a milk, with whatever practices that are happening, and that happened 10 years ago. Okay, so considering that whatever is happening now is of a certain kind, this is the optimum production that it has. Now, when we say that we have optimized at every level, from nutrition to animal care to shelter management to water management to labor management to quality procurement to heat management, all of the things that come into picture. If we have optimized that, and if we are able to get that 15 to 16 liters of milk, then you should not go beyond that, because that's the natural breeding capacity. And genetically, to change it from 15 to 20 will take years. Even when we offer our feed to farmers are like, this is not giving us a 2 to 3 liters of an increase. They immediately want that increase. That is naturally not possible. The first thing is to optimize all the resources. So if you realize and if you think that if your actions are optimized at every level, and this is the productivity that you receive, then you should not get into increasing the productivity. Rather, you should work on the smaller aspects of it, procuring higher quality, making the most of the calving period. So when I mean that with our feeding, the natural decrease in milk volume was decreased, is because the calf has a cycle. So in the first 2-3 months, it is the animal has a cycle, sorry. So in the first 3 months, it is the highest milking
which
animal.
Is reserved for its cow, which is reserved for its cow.
Yeah, it is reserved. So basically, it milks more, optimum of its capacity, around 15 to 20 liters, whatever breed it is. This is not applicable for the foreign cows because they are high milkers. So considering the Indian animals, they'll be milking around 15 to 20 liters in the first 2 months. Then naturally, there's a sudden decrease. Now, why this decrease happens is because of 2-3 reasons. The nutrition that was given pre-pregnancy and during pregnancy sufficed only that period. So naturally, there becomes a decrease in body absorption and things like that. Plus, in India, we have a tendency that within 2.5 to 3 months, we get the animal pregnant again. So the conception, the heat cycle and all that begins at 2.5 to 3 months. During the course of these times, there is a decrease in milk. After that, again, after 15-20 days, there's going to be a natural decrease. Why? Because bodily changes happen as the cow gets becoming, the conception is successful, and then there's first month of pregnancy, there's second month of pregnancy. The body undergoes a lot of changes just like a woman does. With that, there's change in the quality and quantity of milk that is procured. Right? So when I mean there's a decrease in delay, what we intend to do is optimize. Because farmers tend to cut down on nutrition when the animal is no more milking high, they don't tend to get extra milk. So when we say, we talk of the overall milk procurement in the overall cycle. And we want to ensure that the milk that you get in the entire cycle is higher than before. So if by 2.5 to 3 months it is going to be reduced, we would want to ensure and optimize it in a manner. We would give all the nutrition, microbes, all that, and see, is this going to be a higher milker for the 3 complete months or 3.5 months? So by feeding, if this happens, it required that nutrition. If it doesn't happen in a particular scenario, which means that all his nutrition was already complete and whatever we are giving is extra. So we need not take that expense on that animal.
No, it's a very interesting point that you're bringing this up, because as I'm hearing you, I'm beginning to also to wonder what is the impact of the reproductive cycle of an animal. And how does it play in? I don't want everything laid down everything back to the nutrition, but because that's a focus, I'm kind of curious to explore that. How does that changes impact? Right? Because you said that we were with now artificial insemination, we are also beginning to store these and so the reproductive practices also evolved. So, and you mentioned the example that you mentioned about your grandmother who was talking about that every 6 cycles and has come down. So how do you see the shift? Is it a necessary shift in terms of the times, or do you see this as a certain amount of concern?
See, it's a concern for sure. The concern is because I would definitely not want to mention that nutrition is the only concern here, but it's the micronutrients, because all the functions in the body that you see, whether it is reproduction, whether it is metabolization, all of that requires nutrients at the core level, micronutrients, salts, potassium, magnesium, whatever it is. So what has happened is with commercialization and with the thought process of extracting more and more from the cows and the animals, after 2-3 years, the cow no more has the natural So it is called as limiting nutrition. So there are certain amino acids that the cow makes it for herself while she is milking for her own processes. So basically it's the microbe in the gut which are making these amino acids for the metabolization. But after a certain period, because the cow is also aging, it stops making it in the quantity that is required. So you have to give it from outside, right? This is called as limiting nutrition. So the cow has the ability to make it, but it is no more making it due to the other factors in the system. Aging, extracting a lot in the first 2 high milking periods itself, things like that. So now what happens is that all these factors are taking away all the micronutrients that are also required for reproduction. So if and then there is adulteration in nutrition, which is again not supporting the requirements that the cow needs. So when a cow is being conceived, it is artificially conception. B, the heat cycles are very important to be taken care of here. So if you can see that, okay, this is, if you observe the animal well, you will see, okay, she is on the heat period. Then you conceive it. The conception has to be proper. Now, naturally, the animals are wired to conception in the natural way, to have a partner and then do it, which is more natural. Now, putting an injection, what happens is, it is like the job is done, but the animal's mind does not know that it is conceived. That's why if you see in A2 farms, in Gir cow farms, there's always a bull rather than artificial insemination. A, to preserve the breed, and B, to ensure that everything is right from the day one. So artificial insemination is sort of convenience that we have arrived at, for the progression that we wanted. So it all affects the nutrition that it affects. So, even in case of humans, you see, there are a lot of problems faced during the pregnancy period in our generation than it used to in our parents' generation. It's the same reason.
It's very interesting.
It all correlates. It all correlates. And the worst thing here is, in the last period of pregnancy in a cow, when it is on a dry period and no more milking, farmers tend to invest minimum on that cow, whereas that cow should be taken care of the most because it is going to deliver a child. So when the child gets delivered and the cow has not been fed properly in the last month, then there are issues. There is either death, early death, lack of milking postpartum. All these issues arise. So it actually boils down to nutrition. But now, because of the veterinary inputs, because of medication, people are giving medication for ketosis. People are giving medication for milking postpartum. But it was something that you have to do before the cow is going to be into that stage, right? So that is where it is all going wrong. And then there's always this mentality of being like going for a treatment rather than a prevention, right? Which is why veterinary medicines sell more than nutrition.
Yeah, and also anyway in this country we at least in India we don't have much of a veterinary ecosystem also.
Yes.
So which makes it even more important to focus on
absolutely
nutrition there. I mean, and
forget
your point,
veterinary inputs, we don't even have regulations for nutrition.
yeah which makes people like you in a trailblazing path to set the rules also.
Right.
Do you see that aspect also now more and more with more players coming in?
Yes, so certainly there are a lot of players who are identifying these gaps and trying to get in tech, trying to get in AI, trying to get in a lot of organization to this sector. But what happens is, whether it is product manufacturers like us or service providers, like there are many marketplaces to offer products and things like that. The dairy sector and the animal husbandry sector is such a difficult domain that what will matter is who survives and who continues to do that. Because if we are not fetching profits, investors are not interested to give us money, because this is like more of a sustainable social sector enterprise rather than a money minting startup, So although there are a lot of players coming in, interesting would be to see how the impact has been created with whatever efforts that different startups like me are taking into. And this impact will certainly take time. So whenever it is animal husbandry or startups in this sector, I would really want to suggest people to just have some patience, because you're dealing with a biological entity, and the impact and the effort takes time. It cannot be quick, because even when we meet farmers, they say, okay, we are feeding your product and in 3 days we are not seeing any result. So that doesn't happen unless and until you're giving some magic adulterant there, which would induce everything right in just one day. So even the farmers are corrupted now because of the previous feed industries norms and habits that they have been. So it's really a long journey where you really have to be perseverant. You really have to be banging your heads to be in this industry.
Yeah, no, and I think more than humans, I'm reminded of our earlier conversation where we spoke about how cows tend to get addicted to their feeds. Right. Maybe talk more about that, in terms of, because of the fact that agriculture is an allied sector, whatever is remaining, we tend to put them, give them to the cows, and we start also making them addicted to sugars.
Yes.
Sugar or jaggery or whatever. Yeah.
Forget something. The other day I saw a product which has a strawberry flavor, which has a butterscotch flavor. Now, has the cow ever consumed butterscotch in its life? Come on, Nick. These are the flavors you get in supplements and feed brands. I mean, so that's insane. And that's to tell you that, that is what is happening. See, what happens is not just the food that they eat, but the manner in which they eat is also something that they get used to. And a minor change in that is not acceptable. It directly hampers milk productivity.
Give me an example.
So, for example, if there is wheat bran that I am feeding to the cows and it is of a certain coarseness, I will eat it like that. If you reduce the coarseness or improve, like you keep it more coarser and it comes on my plate, I'll be like, what are you serving me? So I want it in a particular way. I want it in a particular manner. I want it at a particular time. You cannot mess with that. That is one thing. And second, that again, the cows are very picky. Now, if you really see the indigenous cows, they are very emotional and picky. They're just like people. So if the Gir cow specifically, it is so emotional. If the mood is not right, you give her diamonds, she is not going to eat it. So first you'll have to give her all the love, pamper her, do all of that, give her what she likes, and then she'll be eating it.
Yeah, this is very nice to hear it, because it goes back to the conversation of seeing them as sentient animals, beings.
Yes. So therefore, we see that shift where there are certain people who are trying to do everything in a sustainable manner to keep the natural practices going on. And then there is a group which is completely getting into the commercial domain, becoming of a standard of a US or a European dairy where everything is commercialized, optimized. So we as a country need both the approaches, but somewhere we need to realize where to stop and what is not acceptable, because in India, animals are not just for the sake of minting milk or, milking machines. So it all goes around and comes around. So,
see, that's where, right? I tend to question this productivity bias. I mean, I have this anti-productivity bias from that sense, right? Because if you're only going to make them overproductive, eventually, what is happening right now in the Europe and with all their crazy methane policies is largely a matter of overproductive cattle not respecting in sync with the environmental processes.
Right.
Because our consumption of meat has grown, because our consumption of dairy has grown, and so we also have overproductive cattle, and which I could very well use as capital because it is no longer a cattle. But in that overproductive cattle has completely lost sync, and so we are now saying we don't need cattle at all.
Right.
So the anxiety is there.
So see, if you see the trend, how everything, if it becomes into capitalization, everything fails, So now if you see the European countries, Europe is still better because there are pastures and things like that. There's some sentiment involved, all of that. But now let's see some Arabian countries, some, the Arab states where meat is of a major concern than milk is. Now, what happens is you have the animals, you rear them and take the complete possible potential of them in 2 years. So if the animal is going to milk for 4-5 years or 10 years, you ensure that all the potential is used up in the next 2 years. For example, if naturally it is going to be milking around 40 liters, you will do all that which leads to the cow making it 50 or 60 liters in the first 2 years. A spike curve. And then after 2-3 years, you just cull them because you have a bigger meat industry.
Yeah, maybe there are varieties that are better optimized for that.
Better optimized, yeah. So there are better optimized varieties which are beef cattle, which are things like that, where beef is a form of regular cuisine. So it is actually a machine. 2 years, use it. Then again use it for the sake of meat.
Yeah.
So, but whereas in our case, in most of the places, the animals are not sent out for culling. A, religious practices, and B, there is also a way of protecting it till it dies. It has to die in your farm shape. So then there becomes a problem of having a lot of stray cattle, because the productivity is lost in the early years. Then it is no more of use. And fortunately, we are in India now, because of the religious and the cultural angle to it. There are places where these animals are being taken care of. There is cow dung products being made from them and all that. The cycle is set. So we really need to realize the mistakes that others have done who have got onto a commercial angle very early in life, and try to avoid them. So there have to be policies and government measures to see that we don't continue and to repeat what has already happened. We learn from them. We put in our own things into practice and perspective, and have our own vision to, the white revolution was important for economy, for the employment, for everything as a country when we were in that stage. But now that we are more aware as a population and more well equipped with a good, you could say, expert advice, government policy making, and all of that, we should be making policies to realize that we are not going in that direction where we think of, we have so much of a milk, now what to do of it? Now let's just kill all animals and make lab milk. So, these are all then going to be difficult situations in our case.
No, so we're also seeing at the same time the impact of climate change, right? Because of climate change, now with the increase in moisture, I mean, that's what we saw in Rajasthan, right? Because there was so more moisture, and there was also heat stress and all of that was also affecting them for the lumpy skin. I mean, that's what we saw in lumpy cow disease, LSD. Right. So in that kind of a case, are we seeing that now with climate change that they're becoming more also susceptible to diseases, and so we need to also improve the immunity?
Absolutely. And again, you would say that she's only like talking about nutrition, but we have case studies where only nutrition was improved.
It's okay. You're an entrepreneur, so you're forgiven.
Yeah, no. I mean, it actually boils all down to that, because we have case studies which have shown that only improving immunity has reduced mastitis, has reduced lumpy, has reduced all sorts. Because, ultimately, if the body is strong enough to fight off anything, you don't need other antibiotics or things like that. And because of the presence of antibiotics also, there are so many brands who are not able to export milk. Like, in spite of making so much of milk, if you see the export percentage of milk from our country, it is very low. Because the milk quality is not of a certain standard. It has antibiotic presence. It has presence of somatic cells, which indicates high mastitis. And all of these, again, now there's a contradiction here that mastitis is caused by microbes. And then again, you give better nutrition, which has microbes in the gut, which reduces the mastitis outside. So
no, I didn't get that contradiction. You're saying because, is it a case of narrowly focusing on microbes to just treat mastitis? Is that what you're pointing out?
Yeah, there are antibiotics that are being used up to only treat mastitis, and mastitis is again caused by a certain strain of microbes. So rather than so rather than doing all of that, why don't you give microbes that build immunity, by which there is no mastitis and then there is no antibiotic?
Yeah, no, I mean, because you accused me of constantly asking out from nutrition. I'm going to ask this question now. See, today, we have certain progress in a certain level of understanding of nutrition science, right? In a certain manner that has progressed. And we were discussing this earlier, right? In UK, there is a lot of research going on, like, with methane blockers and reducing methane additives. And now there is also talk of vaccination that will permanently mitigate the cow's ability to generate methane. And we are going in almost this. I mean, it seems like there is one path of science in which it's going in a direction that is quite crazy in some sense. At least to an outsider, to me, it seems like. So, as somebody who is both your microbiologist and you who is also went into the business also here, do you see alternative nutrition paradigms also emerging there, or what? How do you see do you see multiplicity of nutrition science paradigms, and how are you looking at this?
Yes, see, absolutely. The excitement and the possibilities are huge. I mean, there could be a lot of things like methane blockers is just one of the ideas that has come up and has been worked upon again by UK, because UK is one of the when it comes to research in the animal husbandry sector, the methane mitigation sector, it has been leading for years now. And precisely with the carbon credit angle to it, they're really interested to identify the possibilities. In fact, they're also working on the first ever carbon chart, to chart out what are the possibilities and how much benefit they're getting out of it. So it is all for the carbon credits and the game that revolves around there that people are looking at these different dimensions. So it started with having feed additives that could improve the capacity and help with methane mitigation. Then there was seaweed coming. So there were some varieties of seaweed which came into nutrition, where they improved again productivity, reduced the nutrition and all sorts, to an extent where now we have methane blockers. Now that would be something you could say a little extreme as per my view goes, because it's nature, and somewhere it's a natural process to consume the food that the animal is getting and then excrete what is not requiring. So if you can curate what it has been eating, you don't need to really stop the methane production there. Because if in the gut methane is not being made, what are the microbes in the gut going to utilize? And if they are not going to utilize anything else, then how are they going to convert the complex products into simpler products? So it is not just methane blockers, but then there has to be a technology by which the work of microbes is made easy, because now you don't have methane being used up and to convert it, right? So then everything else around has to be also changed.
Absolutely. And that's where see the point comes is that we go bonkers and we're just trying to control one variable. Right. And that's where it goes back to the starting point.
Because that again has happened because, like I said, they have achieved the optimum potential. Now, improving the feed is no more going to help them. Improving the dairy practices are no more going to help them. So the only way they have is to think of some out of the box possibilities, which could be the only way. Because see, in India, there are 1,000 number of inputs that I can give in terms of optimization, because we are not there yet. But with their regards, everything is so optimized. The water is of good quality, the quality procurement, there is the heat cycle being mapped day to day. In fact, there was an article where I read that a dairy farmer in UK and US knows the quantity of milk that 4-5 generations before have been procuring. And they compare that, is their granddaughter making the same milk? Is it of the same quality? They have that sort of a data. It is so all optimized. So after a certain level, you cannot push that. And then you have to think of such possibilities. So rather than just kill animals and then let's make lab milk, this is also another possibility that, you take milk, you study all the molecules, and then you make the molecules in an artificial manner altogether.
Yeah, which we haven't explored in this conversation.
Right. So that is another dimension. So once you're optimized, then your mind can go haywire. But these are all possibilities with growing times they are into, but we are far off from reaching there, We need to first sit with our own problems.
No, I think what you're saying is extremely fascinating, because see, here's what is happening, right? We are saying we need to optimize, but at the same time, we are seeing what those who completely optimize are doing. Can we see this both together? I think that's where it's getting crazy.
So exactly where I said, that this is because we know where we are heading to, and it could be really destroying our sustainability or our culture. We should we should set our own standards and practices where we know that, okay, we want to be commercializing things, but here's our line. And this is what we cannot, and this is what we can. So it's all about the policy making. Yeah. Because the trends.
Yeah. So I mean, it's a great point that you're mentioning, right? So why don't I'm just curious to get a little more specific in this, right? So why don't you maybe help us list out what could be aspects of from a policy making, maybe, and because there is now we now know for a fact that there is literally no regulation to monitor the amount of the nutrition elements that goes into the animal nutrition products. So what could be a series of, let's say, as knows that are probably not worth tampering upon?
Right. So it begins from farmer awareness. So there could be a certain specified set screening. If you're a dairy farmer procuring milk, you need to at least know something, like a certified course or something, which tells you that, okay, I know that I'm supposed to give nutrition. I know that this is what I'm supposed to do. A conscious, aware procurer of milk. What are the ethical practices? What are not the ethical practices? Is the farmer really aware? Is the farmer even aware how to read product labels? What is the product company giving you? For a simple thing, for example, there was a product which was saying that it has calcium, and it had around 1 gram of calcium in entire 1 kg. Right? So that means, and that 1 kg is being used up at least for 15 days. So in 15 days, imagine 0.5 gram, how little every day is going. The ideal dosage is set apart. No one even knows what's the ideal dosage of calcium that should be going. So when I say I'm giving 6 grams of calcium in my everyday dose, so people cross question me saying, I give calcium already. Look at the product that I'm giving. Calcium is mentioned here. So there is no logic and conscious understanding about how much calcium is going in your feed, what is the daily requirement of the animal, nothing of that sort, So that sort of an approach should be required at the farmer level. And the animal husbandry efforts, and when the Ministry of Animal Husbandry or, the grassroots efforts can take into consideration that the farmers are aware of what they intend to, because every farmer, if you see in US, is aware of what goes in. There is a set course by, let's say, Penn State or University of Pennsylvania or things like that. You have to take up that course to be a farmer.
Yeah, and I guess today,
so something of that sort. So that is the step 1. The step 2 would be nutrition regulation. What goes in is of a certain standard. Now, when it comes to pelleted feed in India, we do have a set standard. There is there is ISI there. There is Bureau of Indian Standards put up there. But not all factories are complying that. Right? So every feed should be complacent. Otherwise, please don't sell. 2, the ingredients need to be tested. Where are the ingredients coming from? Also, there has to be a scope for newer products like us to be in the market. There is no regulation for newer innovative products. Like FSSAI has a possibility to trade yourself, like put your product into a proprietary product category. FSSAI gives that. But FSSAI doesn't. When I go to FSSAI says, oh, we are only there for humans. We cannot give you a regulation for animals. Right? So then I'm stuck. I cannot sell my product because as a startup, I'm asked to show a certificate, which I don't have.
Yeah, no, and also I'm wondering, now that we're discussing this there, right? Today we have BI specifications for cattle feed, and we have this type 1, type 2, type 3, right? We've discussed this in the past long back. And there's also this NDDB standards for compound cattle feed, and we see different standards, right? So considering all that we've discussed so far in terms of how the variants vary, how the different breeds vary in their, in their operating conditions and their health needs. So I'm wondering, if today there is one board that is saying that these are the guidelines, for which to what extent do they account the diversity in those regions? Say?
They do. See, in fact, NDDB has also a document which specifies the mineral mixture needs of certain regions.
I see.
They do have a read. They have specified it on the website itself. So they have taken that into consideration, because in Sabat, it is again at a brief level. So they're considering the salt concentration, they're considering the mineral vitamin concentration. Some of the other minerals may be definitely limited there and have to be added as per the feeding regimes, but there definitely is put up there, and it should evolve with time. There should be a lot of research that we as startups are able to see, because now, because there is no research and data available, we are spending our time in doing that research. Whereas if we have the information available, my startup would have really excelled 2 years ago. No, so this is the third element. Like, we came on regulations, we came on farmer awareness and certifications. The third is research and data availability with regards to our indigenous species. There are a lot of publications being put up, but how much of that comes to us and how much of that is accessible to us or is real time? The third would be to again look at all the practices involved there. First is to talk of quality, the quality of milk that is being procured. Quality is just not the fat and the SNF content and the protein content in milk. It is much more. Is there, so what is the somatic cell count? What is the antibiotic presence, to name a few? And these are not even tested at the farm level, not even tested at the dairy level. It's directly the dairy producer who's the final person, converting the milk into some product is bothered with that. And then he has to work on that. So if the farmer is not being aware of these things, and if the farmer doesn't know that only if you procure high quality, your milk is going to be, bought. So the parameters that we have are only milk fat and SNF, and
it's very consumer driven. I mean, it's
consumer driven, very consumer driven, and more than that, then adulteration happens. So if it is buffalo milk, which fetches a good value, and my buffalo is not giving a high milk, I mix goat milk into buffalo milk, because goat milk has a very good high fat value. So you or I, as a consumer, we don't even know, are we having goat milk or buffalo milk?
No, it's fascinating the points you're mentioning here, because see, today the sad reality is that for a farmer, whenever for his everyday, I mean, at least the standard pattern has been that until you talk about like specific dairy farmers, but for regular farmers, for everyday cash flow needs, I'll have a cow. Right, and that has been the practice there, and so most of the aspects are sort of in a second degree of priority when compared to the primary occupation.
Right.
I think that is another aspect that probably only when that kind of a economic equation changes, then we can maybe explore aspects of bringing in more regulation and right. All of that.
First, see, even if we have to go to the commercial way or the sustainable way, economics come into picture first, right?
Absolutely.
But at the farm level, at a brief level, they understand that this is what they can afford and this is what they cannot afford. But they are not seeing an impact that, instead of spending on instead of spending on treatment, why don't you spend on prevention? So the thought process has to change at all levels. And it only comes when there are certain stringent norms when it comes to quality procurement. See, now there are farms, like there are brands who are procuring designer milk. Now, designer milk is something that the milk will have certain required traits. For example, milk that is akin to a mother's milk. It will have composition just like that of mother's milk, because there are so many women today who cannot milk, who are not lactating. So you can procure that milk and maybe give it to the babies, right? So this milk also comes from the cows. But again, there is engineering at the nutrition level, which ensures you get a milk of a certain quality or quantity, and it has traits of those sort. So this is also happening now. And so the idea is that if there is a certain buyer, the farmers are ready to do what the buyer wants, because they only have to fetch their everyday money. Now, if as a buyer, if at a policy level, I say, I will not give you money unless these are the criteria that are fulfilled, which at this moment are only fat SNF. If there are certain other layers put up, then the farmer will not do practices that will not fetch him that money.
When consumer is the king, why not consumer
Yeah, and
dictate practices
are
there?
we as consumers, like I recently also wrote on LinkedIn, are we as consumers even asking for the quality that we are getting? We're really not bothered. And if we start being conscious, the farmers will not do it. If I say, oh, this is the monsoon period and I get milk which is a little smelly and I'm not able to eat this, I'm not going to have this, this is not a good brand that I'm procuring, then automatically the brand has to take efforts, because ultimately consumer is the king.
No, I think this is very interesting, because we are also now looking at the consumer side of things from the producer side of things, and today obviously we have a lot to go to sort of change in kind of the ground reality, and I think this is fascinating conversation. Thank you. I think we've covered a lot of interesting ground.
Absolutely.
And I think we hope that this ecosystem changes for the better. I mean, your last point was very intriguing in terms of the designer milk, and I think if you extend that from an animal husbandry and from a dairy perspective in an animal context, I think the possibilities are very intriguing, and perhaps that's we'll have to look at the aspect of how, as consumers, as producers, as policymakers, as feed manufacturers, as dairy players, what all kind of ways we all have to collaborate to make this ecosystem work. Because I think when the dairy prices increased, and there was almost like a reckoning of sorts of that this industry has taken this dairy sector for granted.
Absolutely.
And now we're seeing the competition happening between different states. There is price wars happening, and there is there are also these newer startups like yours, and which are all trying to sort of look at some of these aspects there. So let's hope that these changes bring some newer possibilities to this ecosystem.
Certainly, there's a long way, but I really feel that policymakers and regulations can ease out this process. And then there are, like you mentioned, there are a good number of startups coming up who really want to do the good. Okay. So even if they are able to flourish, we can say that we are on a positive trend,
Yeah. I think on that optimistic note, yes. Thank you. We will hope that this ecosystem changes for the better. And thank you for really being unhinged in sharing your opinions. I really liked it. I mean, I tend to hesitate. I must share this in all candor, that I tend to hesitate to bring in entrepreneurs, because sometimes it becomes just one narrative.
Right.
And I think having you in this podcast was really a refresher, because we explored a whole lot of aspects of this domain. And this domain is very interesting because it exposes you to the possibilities and also the limits of what you could do.
Yes.
So in a much more tangible and visible way. I mean, when I look at some of these developments, and this is given a good balanced way to look at it. So thank you very much. I wish you all the very best for Occamy Feeds, and we hope that your startup grows and all of us in the ecosystem also benefit from it.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be here finally, and I really hope our interesting conversation goes on and we explore all the possibilities.
Indeed.
Thank you so much for having here. Thank you.
Pleasure is mine. Thank you.
Yeah.